Okay, before we start latitude and longitude practice number 2, we kind of need to go back and make sure that we're okay with latitude and longitude number 1, which is the first thing we're going to do. Take out your assignment from yesterday. That was your first practice on latitude and longitude. Here are the answers. Check your answers. Notice I've abbreviated the north and south as S and N, and the east and west as E and W, and that's fine. Your numbers should be pretty much the same thing that I've got here. So take a minute and compare what I have on the paper versus what you have on the page. If you have something that's different, what you should do is kind of make a mark. Maybe circle it, maybe put a star by something, and you should take a look at that one on the map. And if you can't figure out why I said it was 30 and you have 120 or whatever, you need to ask a question. This is your opportunity for me to clear things up for you before we move on. The only thing I will say is, for now, let's ignore anything that you said was a negative number. I'm going to address that after you've kind of checked to see that you have the basic information. So pause this at this time and check your answers. Okay, so let's talk about these positives and negatives. You'll notice over here, a lot of you would have said negative 30, especially say for I. And here we've got all negative numbers on these. We also have negative numbers on these longitudes. And the question is, are the negatives important? Well, yes and no. And let me explain to you why some of these had negative numbers, but I didn't use negative numbers on the answer key. And that's because we're trying to say whether something is north, south, east, and west. And I want you to think about this as kind of like your coordinate system in math. And most of you know that you go positive x this way and positive y that way, you know, negative x and negative y. You get that. And that's where the positive and negative numbers come into play here. That there was a time where they assigned negative numbers to longitudes that went this way and latitudes that went this way, just like your x's and y's in math. Now that's actually kind of a more recent development. Here's why they did that. In the early days of computers, a computer could not make any sense of what that n meant. It also couldn't make any sense of what the E or W meant for east and west. And that's how we had always written down latitude and longitude. We said it's some number north and then some number east, or south and west. The problem became when computers started doing some of our math for us. And we would take a point on this map, say the distance from J to M. And you might remember from algebra, there is a mathematical formula that allows you to calculate the distance between any 2 points. Well, that's what we use these maps for. How far is it from J to M? And so long as you were doing the math by hand, you know, it wasn't so bad. But once computers started doing the math, early computers really couldn't make any sense of those. And there's a big difference between 40 north and 40 south. So for early computers to be able to do the math, they started assigning positive and negative values to them, which makes sense because then they're just like math numbers. So you're going to see both the letters and the positives and negatives. So for B here, you can say that is 15 south because it is going south. It's down, it's on that 15 line. Or you could say it's negative 15. You could also say it's 90 west, like I say here, or you could say it's negative 90. Either way works, and you're gonna see both of them, and that's why I try to expose you to both of them. Now here's what you cannot do. This doesn't make any sense at all to do this. This is redundant. You don't need the negative sign and south. That's saying the same thing twice. You don't need negative and west because it's saying the same thing twice. So you say one or the other. You either use the letters or you use the positives and negatives. Me personally, I actually kind of prefer to use the letters because to me it makes more sense when you're looking at a map, north, south, east, and west. So the next step with this is the same map. Got the latitudes and longitudes on there, and you'll notice this one actually uses the positives and the negatives. And I want to pick out a location. Pick out number 1. What is its latitude? Well, latitude is going up from the equator, or down. In this case, we're going up. We're going north, and we're on that line for 60. So it's 60 north. Easy enough. But look at the longitude. How far is it this way from the prime meridian? Well, it's not on the 30 line and it's not on the 60 line. It's kind of halfway in between. And let's face it, there are a lot of points that are in between the 30 and the 60. So we have to estimate. If this line is 30 and this line is 60, well, that means there's 30 degrees between the two of them. That number 1 is about halfway from 30 to 60, so it's 15 more. I'm going to say it's about 45 west. So the next step to this is, how do we estimate when things aren't exactly on the line? Let's do another one. For number 2, number 2's right here. Number 2 is right on this line. It's right on that latitude line. It's on the 30 south line. It's exact. I mean, we see it's right there on the line. But for longitude going this way, it's past the 90 line, but it's not to the 120. It's about halfway between 90 and 120. Well, 90 to 120 is a difference of 30. And it looks like it's about halfway in between this line and this line. So halfway is going to be about 15 more than 90. I'm going to say it's about 105, and that is in the western direction. Now, I'm old, got glasses, bifocals, trifocals, and maybe I don't see too well anymore. And you're looking at that number 2 and you think, you know, Coach, it's a little bit further than halfway. I don't think it's 105. I'm going to say that's 106 or 107. That's fine, because you and I might estimate a little different. We might see it or guess a little bit different. Now, what you can't say about number 2, you can't say it's 120 because it's not to the 120 line yet. You can't say it's 90 because it's definitely past the 90 line. Now, some of you get this real easy, but here's that sample map. If you kind of want to self-practice here just a little bit, just to kind of look at the values that I've got over here and look where they are on the map and see, does that kind of make sense? For example, number 3, I said 13 south, because here's number 3. Well, 0, and that's the 30 line. So halfway would have been 15, and I don't know, it's just me. It looked like it wasn't quite halfway between these two lines, so I said 13 south. If you think it's exactly halfway, say 15 south. Neither one of us are wrong. I said 60 east. Now that isn't up for debate because it is right on that line. So you can take a look at these. I already give you the answers. Just kind of look at where those numbers are on the map and see, okay, yeah, I see that. That kind of makes sense. If it doesn't, you should ask. Just call one of us over and say, hey, why did you say this was 28? Or why did you say this one was 90? Why is it east and not west? This is your time to make sure that we get an understanding of this before we do some kind of assessment where it counts. Okay, you feel comfortable with those explanations? You feel comfortable doing this? You're going to pick up this practice assignment, and this is your work for today. You'll get a done stamp. You'll get credit for a classwork or / homework grade. It'll be stamped done. We're going to put it in the notebook. We'll check our answers tomorrow so that you have this to use as a reference when we get to the test and/or quiz on this topic.